Bruce Hoem is our commencement speaker today. He is a professor and the director of the social work field program at Chadron State. For someone who sees himself as more of a practitioner than a teacher, Bruce has earned the highest faculty award for the Nebraska State College system, the Teaching Excellence Award. A native of Wyoming, Bruce earned his master's degree in social work in 1994 from the University of Southern Mississippi in Hattiesburg. His social work experience before joining the faculty at CSC in 2006 included hospice programs in medical institutions in South Dakota and the case management for children with disabilities in Mississippi and Louisiana. He is also trained in critical incident stress debriefing and first response. Bruce highly values hands-on experience and service learning opportunities for his students. Because of this passion, he has arranged for one of his classes to meet at the local nursing home, Crestview Care Center, weekly. He also takes his students to Lincoln for the unicameral's legislative day each year so that they can stay abreast of lawmaking regarding social issues. In other service learning, his professional social work senior class organizes and conducts an annual fall conference. This major conference has incorporated on-stage vignettes by CSC actors, hosted state officials, and other notable authorities addressing timely issues such as sexual abuse, drug abuse, and post-traumatic stress disorder. An especially meaningful topic for Bruce, who is a Vietnam veteran and veterans advocate. He has fostered excellent working relationships with regional veterans groups, Native American groups, and potential employers of CSC social work graduates such as prisons, children's homes, long-term care facilities, and schools. Please join me in welcoming Bruce Hoem.
Boy, that's a hard act to follow. I hope you can all hear me. I'm going to talk in a louder voice. I've had a little bit of a cold. If my voice starts to leave me, it may be a blessing, but I hope it won't. It's a privilege to be here. Let me say that. I can't say that enough. Good evening. Before I begin with what I hope is something that will not bore you too much, I want to say what a great privilege it is to be standing here in the presence of all you graduates. I feel grateful to be here with you. When Dr. Reinke invited me to give this commencement speech, I told him I would consider it an honor. Although I had never done a commencement speech, I felt I could do a reasonable job. After all, as a teacher, I seem to have that innate ability to rattle on and on in my classes, as my students know only too well. I would write some sincere, meaningful, honest, and thoughtful words and be done with it. But as I sat to compose this presentation, I found the words, and maybe even the spirit, to be elusive. This nation had just finished a presidential campaign that had truly wounded us all. I wanted to have words for you graduates that would address what we had all shared, words that might help you and me understand what had happened. But as I said, I could not find those words. I concluded that the politicians had taken those words. On both sides, to one degree or another, they had taken our words, used them, manipulated them, kicked them around, thrown them back at us, and then taken them back to abuse even more. The words are not ours anymore. When they were done with them, they raked them up like a bunch of dead fallen leaves, stuffed them in bags, and threw our words carelessly in the streets across this country. Our words were taken from us by some who did not deserve to know those words, much less speak them. So let them have those words for now. Words belong to all of us, and eventually they will find their way back to all of us. When they return, we will treasure their true value and hold them close. But tonight, the politicians are not with us. Tonight, it's just all of you, all in this audience, and me. No politicians allowed. So perhaps, and with apologies to Dr. Reinke, and with the utmost respect for you graduates, instead of a speech, I'm going to tell you a story. I decided to tell this story after one of my sophomore students, 2 days after the election, in the college library said, "I feel mad. It's scary. Do you know what I mean?" I nodded as I felt I did know what she meant. This story has to do with a time in my life when I had feelings similar to the feelings that my student expressed, that are being expressed or held silently by many students on this campus and others in this country. I think there is some good to come from my telling this story tonight. When I am done, I hope you will agree. It's a story I've never told publicly before. I'm going to tell you a story about a cat and a story about me, but I think it's mostly about the cat. When I am finished, the story will be mostly about those of you who are graduating here this evening. I can't tell you much about that cat. I can't tell you how old that cat was, where that cat lived. I can't even tell you what color that cat was. Was it a male, a female? I don't know. I met that cat only once for a brief time, and then I never saw that cat again. And it was over 40 years ago that I saw that cat. But to get to the story about the cat, I first have to tell you another story. Now, if you were one of my students, this would be when you would roll your eyes and think, oh no, not another one of his stories. And I'm afraid so, but please indulge me. It's really not that long. When I was 18 years old and 19, I thought more than once that I was going to die. There were days when I thought that I and some of my friends would all be dead at the end of the day. There was no way around it. The night would come and I would not be dead. And then one night I would think the same thing, and then on other days and nights the same thing again. This went on for the 18 months that I was in Vietnam. Not all the days and nights were deadly, but enough were. But obviously I did not end up dead. I went to Vietnam in 1968. It was not my desire to go to Vietnam. I really only wanted to remain a cowboy for the rest of my life. That was my desire. There was nothing I liked more than riding a fast quarter horse through the Wyoming sagebrush, chasing back calves that had strayed from the herd we were moving to summer pasture in the mountains. When I was in Vietnam, I thought about that, and I began to think about where we were and what we were doing in Vietnam. And I began to be afraid. You might think I was afraid because I was in Vietnam and afraid of dying. But that was not it, actually, although I certainly did not want to die there. And no, I was not ever brave, and I was not ever heroic. It's like everyone around me, I just did what I was supposed to do. I did my duty. But yes, I was afraid. I was afraid for what we were doing there, and that I would never be doing anything but what I was doing at that time. I was afraid that the life I was living then, that the things I was a part of, these were the things that had now become permanent for me. There would never be another day when I would ride a fast quarter horse through the Wyoming sagebrush. It even began to seem like I never had. I had stepped into a science fiction novel where I had moved from one time and place to another. And inching my way through the surrealistic days of Vietnam was forever to be my fate. But when my 18 months were over, I did leave Vietnam. I was 20 years old. When I was discharged from the Army, I wanted to make a difference in the world. I believed I had the true and real answer about war. Surely, if I somehow told as many people as I could that war is not good for any of us, I would be believed. All I had to do was start telling people. I know that sounds ridiculous, doesn't it? But I did tell a lot of people that I did not think war was good for anyone. When telling didn't seem to make much difference, I began writing about it. I wrote numerous manuscripts and short stories. I wrote poetry. But I was not having much luck convincing anyone of anything, despite the fact that war is not good for anyone seemed so obvious. And then someone told me he thought I should go to college. College, me, go to college. How could I ever go to college? What did I know of college? I only knew that colleges existed, and if you were smart enough, you could somehow go to college. I had never been on a college campus. And a college campus was a place where I believed I might not be welcomed. I was no longer a soldier, but I was a lot closer to being a soldier than I was to being a student. Students were on campuses, not soldiers. But I also believed that people went to college and became smarter for it, that there was something that happened on those campuses that was good, and I decided to give it a try. Maybe with more fear than I had ever felt in Vietnam, I enrolled in a community college in Wyoming. I immediately found out that I was right. There were smart people on that campus. I met teachers who amazed me with all they knew. I met other students whom I envied and admired for their intelligence. I knew that there was really something valuable to be learned in college if I was willing to learn it, and I was really willing. But still, something wasn't right. Something was missing. No, it wasn't the cat that was missing in my life, or maybe it was the cat that was missing in my life. But that cat and I were destined not to meet for another year and a half on a very cold Wyoming night. So it's not yet time to tell you about that cat. What was missing in those college halls and in those college classrooms and with those students and with those teachers was the answer to my question, the question I had carried home from Vietnam and the question I was still carrying around. How do we abolish the evil that rears its ugly head in so many places and so often on our earth? Which of my teachers was going to answer that question for me? They had taught me math, they had taught me history, they had taught me English, mythology. They had taught me so many wonderful things that in my wildest dreams, I never could have imagined I would have the opportunity to learn. But the time came when I realized that my teachers were not going to teach me how we were going to stop the evil that seems to be a faithful and enduring companion to our human existence. They did not have the answer. 6, 8, and even 10 years of education before they came into the classroom, and none of them had the answer. As I look back on it now, it was, of course, unrealistic for me to believe that a teacher would have the answer I was so desperate to have. If I had asked this question of one of them point blank, how do we abolish the evil, would he or she have reached for a book, put on some scholarly looking glasses, opened the book and turned to a specific page and said, well, Bruce, here's the answer right here on page 86? No. In that imaginary scenario, if I had asked that question and if I had dared to look, the page would have been blank, and I would have felt a familiar hardness in my heart. Now the cat. It was a cold Wyoming January night. The temperature was below zero, and the wind was howling. I had a night class. I had to drive about 8 miles to get to the town and the college. It was so cold that night that I'd kept my old car idling off and on outside my door so I wouldn't have to worry about it starting. It was never the best starter, and I did not want to be late for that night class because it was a special night class. The teacher had arranged for a guest speaker to be in class that night, someone who had been on television for something, and for reasons I cannot remember, I was to introduce the speaker. I had my humble little paper folded in my pocket, all ready to read as I introduced him. So into the cold Wyoming night I went. I had driven about 2 miles on that frozen, snow-packed highway when I saw something in my headlights, something that wasn't moving. I slowed and stopped. It was a cat. But now I have to tell you one other thing, as this has always seemed important to me. I was dressed as well as I could afford to dress, with very little money finding its way into my checking account. But I was wearing a nice leather coat. It was not a new coat, maybe not a really fancy coat as I think about it, but I had saved my money and bought that leather coat at a secondhand store in Grable, Wyoming. It was the nicest coat I'd ever owned. So there sits a cat in the middle of the highway. It's a cold, wind-driven night in Wyoming, and there sits a cat. And the cat was sitting motionless. There was not another car in sight. I sat behind the wheel, really only briefly, not wanting to open the door to the piercing cold. But I got out, left my car sitting in the lane with the bright lights shining, and walked and slid my way in the wind toward that cat. When I got within a few feet of the cat, I saw why he was sitting motionless. He was covered with blood. It was clear that he had been hit by a car. I can't remember tonight all the thoughts I had at that moment, I have to get to the college. I'm wearing my best clothes. It's freezing. I'm sorry for the cat, but it's just a cat. I have to get to the campus. I can't do anything about this cat. I'm sorry, but I can't do anything about it. I've got other things to do, and it is just a cat. And I turned to leave, determined to be where I was supposed to be. I was going to do what I was supposed to do. I was going to be at the college. I had a duty there. I started back toward the bright lights in my car, and I was mad at that cat. Why had he been on the highway? Why was he such a stupid cat? Why did he have to be there that night when I was supposed to be at the college? I was angry, but I was angry at the fierce Wyoming wind, the cold, the snow, the ice, Vietnam, and the cat. It seemed I was angry at everything that had ever been, everything that was, and everything around and in me. But I stopped. I was exhausted. It was like with every icy breath, the exhaustion settled deeper and deeper and deeper, and I couldn't keep it up. I turned and walked back to the cat. Kneeling down, I took off my leather coat that meant so much to me and wrapped that bloody cat gently in my coat. I carried the cat back to my car and placed him carefully on the front seat. He did not make a sound. I drove into town, went to where I knew the vet's office was, and jotted down the emergency number that was on the door. I found a phone booth, no cell phones back then, called the vet, and then waited in the cold blowing darkness with that cat until the vet arrived. "Oh my gosh," the vet said as he helped me unwrap the cat from the stiff folds of my coat. The vet performed surgery that night, and the cat was, cross your fingers, expected to live, I learned the next day when I went back to check on him. The vet said he also knew someone who would take the cat, and he did not make me pay a bill, which I was actually very worried about. Well, I did not make it to class that night, and my nice leather coat was permanently bloodstained. In fact, I ended up dropping that class. It didn't mean but I didn't care that I had dropped it. It did not mean I was a failure, just that I had dropped the class. But the answer that I had unfairly expected from my teachers, I did find on that cold Wyoming night, and it had been there for me to discover all the time. There was a hardness in my heart that I had carried back from Vietnam, and over I had felt it. While looking for the answer, I had carried that blinding hardness with me. The answer that all of you have the potential to hear is not to be heard in the classrooms on this campus or in the classrooms on any other campus. The answer for each of you right now is in your heart. The answer is in the small kindnesses that you can show every moment of your life to all others around you, including all creatures, great and small. If you look into your heart and find hate or malice or hardness, search farther and longer until you find better. You do not have to allow the unfortunate, the unfair, and the sometimes ugly circumstances of your life or in this world to decide the person you will be. I did not know how much hardness lurked in my heart until I found that cat that I was going to abandon on that highway. On that relentless Wyoming night, the hardness began to leave my heart. Not a single war has ever been prevented by any words I have ever written since I was in Vietnam. Okay, and I can accept that. But I have tried to be a better person since then. I have tried to make a positive difference here and there along the way. Those differences, too, have probably gone generally unnoticed. And that's okay, too. But I noticed them. So I say to the parents here, to the grandparents, to the brothers, to the sisters, to the husbands, and to the wives, and to all others here tonight, we have done our best to educate these students and to return them to you with an abundance of knowledge and expertise. They were special to us when they came here, and they're special to us now as they begin at this very moment to leave us far behind. I sincerely hope that every graduate sitting here believes, as he or she looks back at us for that last time, that the most profound thing you are leaving here with is something we did not give you at all. It is something that came from your mothers, your fathers, your family, your friends. It came from those you have seen suffering around you. It came from gentle touches, angry words, and forgiving words. It came with all the struggles you have had, are still having, and with all the sorrow and with all the joy. It is the capacity to be a kind person. And if you look into your heart, I promise you will find it there. I ask as I stand here tonight and so honored to be here before you, that you never allow hardness to rule your heart, that you never allow the hate, and that you never allow the anger. Yes, those words that the politicians stole from us will begin to return to us. When they find you, use them eagerly, but do not speak them back into our world, smeared with the vulgarities and prejudice from which they so recently escaped. Instead, treasure their potential to do good. I ask that you graduates please allow kindness to be the difference you will make for our world, and don't be afraid to ruin your coat. Thank you.